holidays and the new year have a way of stirring something deep in us. We reflect, we promise, we reset, and often without realizing it, we recommit to the same patterns that quietly disconnect us from ourselves. Listeners, today's conversation is about those invisible promises and how we begin listening inward again. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mindful Living podcast. I am your host, Sana, and the year turns. Many of us make vows to be better, stronger, more disciplined, more available, less emotional, but more productive. But then here's the question that I want to sit with today. Who are these vows really for? Some vows are spoken too loud, others are inherited, and some are quietly absorbed over time until they start running our lives. Listeners, today's guests know this terrain intimately. Toni LaMotta spent 16 years living under a vow of obedience as a Catholic nun. But her deeper insight is this: leaving the convent did not immediately free her from obedience. It revealed how deeply obedience had already shaped her inner world. And since then, Tony has helped hundreds of people recognize the unspoken vows they make to family expectations, corporate culture, perfectionism, and the relationships where their voice slowly disappears. She's a spiritual coach, master teacher, internationally acclaimed speaker, and holds multiple advanced degrees across theology, education, mathematics, and spiritual leadership. Alistair Stoney's work bridges intellect and intuition, structure and surrender. And today we are exploring what it really means to reclaim your inner compass. So, Tony, welcome to the Mindful Living, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I appreciate it. It's been quite
Thank
a
you.
journey.
Yes, definitely. And Tony, when people hear the word vow, they often think of something, formal or religious, including myself. But you argue that most vows shaping our lives are invisible. So, what are some of the most common vows people are living by without realizing it?
Well, that's a great question because most people don't even realize how they're listening to what their parents taught them, for example. And we live by what we thought was the truth for our life. So we take a vow to, some people like to never not outlive their parents, but, outperform their parents. Some people have a vow to perfectionism that everything has to be perfect. And most of these start in early childhood. I teach something called the Enneagram. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. It's both a psychological and a spiritual tool. And part of it tells us how our ego was formed. And our ego was formed as little children, and we reacted against what was keeping us from our true essence. And so we make a vow to live a certain way. Some people like think they have to be perfect. Some people think they have to outshine everyone and be successful, and it's more important who they are. For some people, it's about taking care of everyone else, and they want to take care of needs for everyone. So everyone, every single one of us make a promise to ourselves without even realizing it. And I call it vows because that's something that for me, it was very obvious. I did take a vow of obedience, which basically told me not to trust my own inner wisdom. And I
Mm.
have noticed how often that's true for most people. We really look outside ourselves, always asking everybody else for their opinion, always looking for, what else should we be finding rather than trusting our own knowing.
Yeah, yeah. And uh, I this is powerful because what you are describing, it doesn't sound like a conscious decision. I mean, it sounds like survival. like learning the rules of belonging before we even learn the language of self trust.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and Tony, I'm really curious to know, like, how early do these vows usually form?
Well, interestingly enough, scientific studies have shown that they happen from the womb up to about 5 years old. So
Oh,
we're already programmed kind of for we come into the world with a temperament. You know, my
mm,
sister had twins, and I remember when they were born, they were so different right from day one. And so
mm,
any parent knows your children come in with a personality. But then and this is where, our life is attached to the divine and we know our perfection, and then we have woundings, and everybody has a wounding, whether it's the way you were born. Some people born with forceps or breech births or different kinds
mm,
of experiences of birth. And then over the years, and it may not have been any big trauma, but all the little traumas of just being little in a big person's world is a trauma to a child. So all of the things that happened in childhood make the child then say, "Oh, this is how I better behave." And they make kind of a promise to themselves, and that's what actually forms our ego. And then we struggle most of our life to get back to our essence.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Um, and a lot of people, Tony, listening, are doing everything right on paper. I mean, it looks like they're doing everything right on paper, but I mean, they're successful, they're responsible, they're admired. But then here's the challenging question: how do we tell the difference between integrity and obedience that is slowly costing us our voice? Like it feels like a cage or like this box that we are trapped within.
Ah, okay. One of the things that I think is really important that most of us miss is the somatic uh, element. It's listening to our bodies. Very often people will say, "Oh god, I knew that wouldn't work," or "I know this wasn't right." And part of it is we deny it. We throw aspirin when we have a headache rather than say, "What is this headache trying to say to me? What is this pain in my stomach happening?" And so often, if we simply pay attention to our bodies, when we are speaking from our own truth, our bodies are totally relaxed and at
Yeah.
peace. We call it the presence. Living in the present and living in the presence is a way to know when we're there, then we're speaking from not only the body, but then the heart and the mind also get engaged. And we're speaking not from the chatter in our mind, but from the quiet mind that knows the truth. And so the best way I can describe to people, how do you know it's really from you and not from something else? Because our body tells us. And the opposite of that is true, is like our bodies are triggered whenever something from childhood is showing up. If somebody makes a remark to us, you know how very often something happens and you just kind of wince and you're like, "Ooh," and you're feeling something, but you override that. What you need to do is take a moment to feel what you're feeling and then even go back in time a little bit and saying, "When did I first feel that?" Because that's what's really going on at the moment. We are never upset for the reason we think. It's always something from the past. And so when, that's how we know our voice. It's to notice when those twinges are happening. Notice when you're being triggered. Um, that then it's not your authentic voice speaking.
Mm, yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you, Tony. Absolutely. Is there such a thing as a healthy obedience to uh, or is obedience always a form of self abandonment? A quick pause for you listening listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow on the Mindful Living. And if someone in your life keeps saying, I am stuck, or I do not know what is wrong with me, share this episode with them after you are done. All right, back to it.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I think there are times, I mean, if you're in an army or even in a corporation, you're following the values of an organization. You want to be able to abide by that. And sometimes it's not exactly what you want at the moment. So I think that there's an opportunity. I mean, we want to pay attention to the laws of our land. We want to obey traffic laws, for example. I mean, it's like, it's not like you want to never listen to anyone else or never listen to outside rules. But, sometimes, for example, when I was in the convent, we had a rule of what they called grand silence. There was a certain time of night you could not look at anybody or speak, and I remember someone was in trouble and they were crying, or something was hurting, and I don't remember the whole scene, but I remember going over and talking to them and breaking grand silence. And, it was a very strong moment for me, but sometimes you need to break a rule. But most of the time, that rule had its purpose. I learned profound mysticism during that time. I spent my time speaking to the divine, so it was a wonderful opportunity, but there are times then you need to break those rules. So yeah, there are moments to be obedient, but it's when our bodies are saying something's wrong here, we have to listen to that rather than listen to the rule.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I really love that. And this distinction matters, because many people um hear reclaiming your voice and probably, like, assume it means rejecting everything, like quitting jobs or ending relationships, burning bridges. But what I'm taking away from, what you shared is something quieter, like less reactive and more discerning. Like, it's not about rejecting the world, it's about no longer disappearing inside it.
Exactly, it's not rejecting at all. I remember one of my clients, man named Jerry, came to me, and he had lots of decisions like that to be made, whether he should leave his job, whether he should
Mm.
leave his wife, whether he should move somewhere, and you know, he was trying to make all these decisions and asking everybody's opinions, and I had to work with him to just get him quiet and say, "What are you really feeling? Like, what's how do you feel when I say leave your job?" And he was like, "Oh, very uneasy." And I said, "Then that's very strongly telling you that's not what you need to do. There may be changes that need to happen at the job." And the same thing was with his relationship. When he thought about leaving, it was just not comfortable. And so I said, "Let's look at how we can make that relationship better." But when he thought about moving, he said, "Oh, he just got this sense of joy." And I said, "Well, then that's something that you might wanna be able to do." So I know it almost sounds simplistic when I'm saying it this way, but it's we're not in touch. We don't get quiet enough to really find out what's going on. What is the inner knowing? And the inner knowing is never wrong. It just tells us exactly what we need to do. And sometimes it doesn't happen like instantaneously. And especially if you're not used to meditating and being quiet and listening, it takes some practice. But I've never found anyone who isn't able to do it eventually.
So that's really good to know. Really good to know. And Tony, as we have stepped into a new year, Many people set intentions. In fact, I have tried it so many times, but then sometimes, these intentions, they can quickly turn into another form of self pressure. So, how do people unknowingly recreate the same vows every January? I mean, just under the label of growth.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. It's like most
Yeah.
people, I actually wrote a book that I many years ago that I almost called "Stop Setting Goals," and and part of it, it was really, in fact, I can explain that because it was very interesting. The book wound up being called "What You Really Want Wants You," and it was an invitation to look at the quality you want to experience in your life rather than the specifics of what you think you want. And so when you focus on a quality, you just focus on that quality and watch how it starts to show up in your life. I give an example. One year in January, once again, I set the quality of beauty, and I don't know why, but that's what came up for me that year. And I was visiting someone's home, and I'm a minister and I was running a church at the time, and she was gonna come and play the crystal bowls for our
Mhm.
church, and she wanted me to see them. I walked into her house and I said, "Forget the bowls, I wanna buy your house." And I was joking, and she looked at me and she said, "I seriously wanna sell this, and I'm looking for a condo." And I was living in a condo, and we wound up selling each other our homes. And
Mm,
the very first thing people said when they walked into this house was, "Oh my God, it's so beautiful here." Now, I
mm,
had to laugh because I wasn't looking at buying a house. I wasn't looking to move. I simply was focused on beauty, and that's what showed up in the form of a house. So it becomes, we think we know what we want, and most of it is our ego, our personality that's making those intentions. And so when we set the whether you call it a goal or call it an intention, very often it's to fix something. And whenever it's to fix something we think is wrong, we're not listening to our authentic voice because we are never wrong. We're whole, we're complete people. And when we're looking at pathology, what's wrong, we get more of what's wrong. And so that's why they don't work. We want to focus on what are the qualities that I know are my inherent, this is my legacy: joy,
mm.
peace, love. Focus just on one of those. Choose one for each year and see what happens. It's quite amazing. I can spend a lot of time telling you stories about each of the ones I've chosen and other people have chosen, and see it makes such a difference to stop shooting on ourselves and trying to tell ourselves we need something's wrong with us. It's there's nothing wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before we wrap up, like for someone who realizes they have been living by borrowed vows for decades, where do they even begin doing? Like, what does the first step toward self trust actually look like in daily life?
Well, there are a couple of things that I have actually, I call them 6 different pillars, and any one of those is a good first step. And one of the ways I teach people who are really not in touch is to start noticing your own spirit and your own energy and see if you can describe it. So when you meet someone, think about how would you describe that person or even a pet or an animal? And so become conscious of that divine energy in things and in people is one way. And then you start noticing when you're out of that energy and you're not feeling that. And all of us have experiences of walking in a room and feeling like something's off, but we don't get conscious of it, so we need to be more conscious. For other people, one of the processes that I love teaching is a journaling process. And it's not just a stream of consciousness writing, it's very directed journaling that helps us to look at what our life is trying to teach us. And so one of the things I teach people, the very first, I'm going to be teaching a class like that coming up soon, actually. And many
Oh,
people just start by writing the 10 major events that have changed your life. And no matter how old you are, you only get 10. And so when you write those events, then I teach people how to look at each of those events and look at who the people were, what the events were, what happened, the decisions you made. And one of those events is probably trying to speak to you today. And we do guided journaling where it's a way that I think most people can, even people who don't like to write because you're not doing it for anybody else's eyes, you simply write out what your experience was, and it's amazing the revelations that happen, and our life tells us what it wants to become. Very fascinating. So that's one way. There, as I said, we don't have time to go over all of them, but there are, multiple different techniques and ways and um that can help. But one of them is just sensing your energy, sensing the energy in the room, even trying to label it, and then sensing I studied with a woman named Sonia Choquette, who I love her work. So I recommend any of her books, but Sonia talks about your barking dog, your spirit and your barking dog, and she asks people to name their spirit and then name their barking dog, and when I teach that to people, almost everybody gets it right away, and you know those 2 voices, and so then you start noticing, is it my spirit or is it my barking dog who's speaking today? That's a simple way of starting.
yeah. And that's beautiful. And I think it's about like relationship, like a slow rebuilding of trust with the self.
Exactly, it doesn't happen overnight, but I've just noticed I'm working with someone right now who said to me, I just never trust my own voice. And so I asked her to try to notice when she is actually being guided. And there is something, that is telling her what to do. And so she started a journal. And we just met last week, and she shared what she wrote in the journal. She said, I didn't realize how often I was hearing what to do, and I was just dismissing it. So it's becoming conscious and becoming aware and mindful of what's actually taking place all the time. I mean, we can talk about spirit guides, and there are angels and guides happening. I just give you this is a crazy example, but I recently broke my ankle. I fell and broke my ankle in 4 places. And my watch, I wear an iWatch, and the iWatch actually called the emergency squad to come and get me. And the minute I gave them my address, my watch died. And no, to me, I was being guided. There was an angel watching over me at that very moment. It just, and everybody I share that story with says, "Oh, wow." I mean, that was kind of a spectacular thing, but things happen like that all the time when we are being guided, you know.
Yep, 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 absolutely. Oh, such a beautiful conclusion to this conversation, listeners. And Tony, of course, you have an upcoming class coming up. And if listeners they would like to connect with you, get access to all the resources that you are sharing, your wisdom as well, how they can connect with you.
Well, thank you. There are lots of different ways, but I think the simplest thing would be to go to ToniLamotta.com, ToniLamotta.com, and sign up. for my mailing list, so you'll keep in touch with all the different things I'm doing. But one of those things, when you sign up, you'll get a quiz that is kind of like telling you where you are in terms of listening to your own inner compass. And then I do have a 6-month program that people can join, and I do both training and coaching. We meet twice a week. Actually, it's pretty intense, but people who are really serious can come and join my Inner Compass program. But once they get onto my website, they can also email me at Dr. Tony, DRTONI, at TonyLaMotta.com, and we can make an appointment to talk, and I can see how I can best help them. I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. Listeners, I'll have all the links and details mentioned in the show notes for every one of you. So um, go check out all the resources shared by Tony, connect with her, refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And as we close today's conversation, I want to leave all of you listeners with this. The new year doesn't require new vows, it asks for honest listening. You don't need to become someone else. You need to hear the voice that learned to go quiet. And Tony, thank you so much for sharing some of the beautiful moments. Um, it sounded like magic, but these are true, authentic, genuine moments that you shared with us, your insights. Thank you. It has been a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. I agree. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. And to all of our listeners, if this episode stirred something within you, let it be. You don't need to act immediately. Just notice what your inner compass has been trying to say. And until then, this is the Mindful Living. I'm Sana, and I'll meet you again where curiosity meets courage. Thank you.